My wife cheated death into my food. Switching plates exposed her poisoning my brother-in-law. I always trusted my instincts. They had never failed me before. A gut feeling, an uneasy twinge in my chest, a moment of hesitation. Those little signs had always been enough to steer me away from trouble. But tonight, as I sat at my sister-in-law's dinner table, staring at the overly elaborate salad in front of me, my instincts weren't just whispering, they were screaming. It was too perfect. The vibrant green leaves were arranged in an almost artistic pattern. The cherry tomatoes were sliced with meticulous precision. The dressing was drizzled in a way that looked more like a chef's masterpiece than something my wife, Clara, would typically prepare. I knew her cooking. It was fine, good even, but she wasn't the type to go out of her way to make anything fancy unless she had a reason. "It's a recipe I learned from a chef," Clara said, her voice dripping with forced sweetness. I looked up at her, my fork hovering over the plate. She was smiling, but it was the kind of smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, the kind you practice in the mirror to make it look natural. And yet, her fingers were wrapped just a little too tightly around her wine glass, the slight tremor in her hands betraying her forced calm. Something wasn't right. I glanced around the table. Megan, my sister-in-law, was happily chatting with her husband, Lucas, who sat directly across from me. He was laughing at something she had said, completely oblivious to the undercurrent of tension in the room. And then the smell hit me. Not bad, just wrong. It was subtle, so subtle that anyone else might not have noticed it, but I did. Beneath the usual tang of vinaigrette and the earthy scent of the greens, there was something else. Something metallic, bitter, artificial. Clara was watching me closely now, waiting. I smiled, took my fork, and with practiced ease, I pretended to love it, a nod of approval, a murmured, this is great. She visibly relaxed. It was all I needed. Lucas, still distracted in conversation, barely noticed when I slid my plate slightly to the side. My movements were precise, fluid, like a magician palming a card in plain sight. His plate, my plate, switched in an instant. He barely even looked as he grabbed his fork and dug in. I leaned back and waited. 25 minutes. That's all it would take. At first I tried to push away the nagging thoughts in my head. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I had misjudged her. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't the first time I had felt inexplicably sick after a meal prepared by Clara. It had been happening for months, waves of nausea, dizziness, headaches that lingered for days. I had gone to doctors, had tests done. They found nothing. And then, strangely, the symptoms would vanish whenever I ate food that she hadn't made. Coincidence? Maybe. But I wasn't the kind of man who believed in coincidences. I didn't want to believe my wife was capable of something this sinister. But if there was one thing I had learned in life, it was this. When your instincts scream at you, listen. So I did. Lucas took another bite, still talking, still completely unaware of the situation unfolding right in front of him. I turned to look at Clara. She wasn't watching him, she was watching me. Her gaze flickered to my plate, no, to Lucas's plate, and then back to me. Realization dawned in her eyes, but she masked it quickly, too quickly. Her lips curled slightly, the corner of her mouth twitching as if she wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. I could see the questions forming in her mind. Had I eaten it? Was I feeling anything yet? Why wasn't I showing any signs? I held her gaze, let the silence stretch between us. Then, ever so slowly, I smirked. It was brief, a flicker of amusement, a private little moment just between us. Her grip tightened around her glass. Lucas, oblivious to the silent battle happening across the table, suddenly paused. He blinked a few times, shook his head slightly as if trying to clear it. Then a small frown creased his forehead. "Huh," he muttered, rubbing his temple. "I feel a little off." Megan turned to him, concern in her eyes. "Maybe you ate too fast." I kept my face neutral, my expression unreadable, but inside, I knew. This was it. I glanced at Clara again. She wasn't looking at him. She was staring at me, her face pale, her breathing just a little too measured. And that was when I knew for certain. This wasn't paranoia. She had planned this, and now she had poisoned the wrong man. The realization hit her like a freight train. I could see it in the way her chest rose and fell in rapid succession, in the way her fingers trembled as she tried to casually take a sip of her wine. I wasn't supposed to be sitting here, fully alert, completely unaffected. Lucas let out a slow breath, rolling his shoulders as if trying to shake off a sudden wave of exhaustion. He frowned at his glass of water, then at his plate. "Weird," he murmured. "So, I just feel dizzy, I guess." Clara remained silent. I said nothing because now the game had truly begun. Lucas was halfway through his salad when I noticed the first sign. It wasn't dramatic. No gasps or clutching at his throat. No immediate collapse. Just a pause, a hesitation. His fork hovered just above his plate, his eyes blinking rapidly as if he was suddenly aware of something being off. I stayed perfectly still, my own fork resting idly against my plate. Across the table, Clara wasn't looking at him. She was watching me. That alone told me everything I needed to know. If she had been innocent, she would have rushed to his side the moment he muttered that he felt off. She would have been full of concern, asking what was wrong, fussing over him like any normal person would. But Clara wasn't normal. Instead, she was still as a statue, her wine glass perched between her fingers, lips slightly parted. 1,000 thoughts must have been racing through her mind at that moment, but her eyes kept flickering toward me, searching my expression for a reaction. I forced myself to act natural. The table was still alive with conversation. Megan, Lucas's wife, hadn't noticed anything yet. She was too busy telling some story about their weekend at the lake house, laughing at something her husband had said earlier. Lucas let out a slow exhale, rubbing his forehead. I feel a little off," he muttered. Megan finally turned to him, concern flickering in her eyes. "Maybe you ate too fast." I watched as Lucas shifted in his chair, rolling his shoulders. He wasn't in immediate distress, but he wasn't comfortable either. A bead of sweat had begun to form at his temple. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for his water glass. And Clara, she was gripping her own glass so tightly that her knuckles were turning white. That was when I knew. This wasn't paranoia. She had planned this. She had intended for this to happen, and now she had poisoned the wrong man. The moment stretched on, suffocating in its weight. Megan was looking at Lucas now, her concern growing, but she hadn't yet connected the dots. "You okay?" she asked, reaching out to touch his arm. Lucas swallowed hard, shaking his head. "I don't know, I feel—" He trailed off, exhaling slowly, his eyelids heavy. "Dizzy. My stomach feels weird." A low hum of unease rippled through the air. Megan was noticing now. I flicked my gaze back to Clara. She still hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, and that was the biggest tell of all. A wife, an innocent wife, would be panicking. She would be fussing over her guest, offering him more water, asking if he needed to lie down. Clara did nothing. She was waiting for me to react, waiting to see if I had figured it out. And I had. I smiled, just the faintest twitch of my lips, enough for her to see it, enough for her to understand. Her eyes widened just slightly before she masked it with a careful breath, forcing a smile of her own. But it wasn't real. It was trembling at the edges, threatening to shatter under the weight of what she had just done. Lucas groaned softly, shifting in his chair again. His hand gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles going as white as Clara's. Megan's voice was more urgent now.
"Oh, Lucas, you don't look good."
The conversation at the table had begun to die down. Other guests were starting to take notice. Lucas exhaled sharply. "And I think I just need some air." I kept my voice light, casual. "Tos, maybe you should lie down for a bit." He nodded slowly, but as he pushed himself up from his chair, his knees buckled, and he swayed dangerously. Megan shot up instantly, grabbing his arm. "Whoa, hey!" I stood too, my movements much calmer. I wasn't surprised by this. I had been expecting it, counting down the minutes. Lucas gripped his head, blinking rapidly. "Which I don't understand," he muttered. "And I just feel so—" He trailed off again. Clara was still seated, still gripping her wine glass, still silent. I turned to her and, in the most even casual voice I could muster, I said, "What exactly was in that salad, honey?" She flinched, a slight reaction, almost imperceptible, but I saw it. Megan looked up at me, confused. "What?" I stayed locked on Clara. "Bun to salad. You said it was from a new recipe." I tilted my head. "What was in it?" She was quick this time. "Oh, just normal ingredients," she said smoothly. "Honorines, nuts, a little dressing." "Why are you asking?" But she knew. She knew exactly why I was asking. Lucas groaned again, gripping his stomach. His face was beginning to pale, the sweat at his temple growing worse. Megan turned to Clara, eyes narrowing slightly. "Wait, why would you ask that?" Clara gave a sharp laugh. Too forced, too brittle. "It's ridiculous," she snapped. "He's probably just dehydrated or something." But Megan wasn't convinced, and neither was I. Lucas shifted again in his seat. His breathing was uneven now, his limbs looking too heavy. I turned back to Clara, lowering my voice just slightly. "You sure about that?" Clara's eyes darted around the table, looking for an escape, but there was none. The dinner party had taken a turn, and everyone was watching now. Then Lucas swayed again, and his legs gave out. He stumbled forward, knocking over his glass. The sharp clink of glass hitting the table echoed through the dining room. followed by a stunned silence. Megan gasped, reaching for him. "Oh my God, Lucas!" Clara stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Her breathing was quick, shallow. "Lucas!" Megan was shaking him now, panic rising in her voice. "Lucas, what's wrong?" But he was slipping. His head lolled slightly, his hands weakly gripping the table. And then I did it, calmly, methodically, without hesitation. I pulled out my phone, and I pressed record. The red light blinked to life, capturing everything, and I said clearly, firmly, "And let's get him to the hospital." Then I turned, locking eyes with Clara.
And while we're there, maybe we should run a toxicology test on that salad.
The room fell silent. Clara went rigid. I could see it in her face, the panic, the realization, the understanding that her plan had gone horribly, horribly wrong. I exhaled slowly. "Game over, Clara." The moment I said those words, the room seemed to freeze. The air became thick with an uncomfortable silence, as if everyone suddenly felt the weight of something much bigger than a simple dinner party gone wrong. Megan clung to Lucas, her face etched with growing panic, while the other guests exchanged confused glances. But my attention never wavered. I was focused on one person, Clara. She was standing now, her chair abandoned, her grip still tight around her wineglass. Her knuckles were white, her lips slightly parted, as if she wanted to speak but couldn't find the right words. She was trying to think, trying to spin the situation into something manageable, but there was nothing to salvage here, not this time. Lucas let out a low groan, his body leaning heavily against Megan's support. His forehead was slick with sweat, and his normally tan skin had taken on a pale, almost grayish hue. His breaths were shallow, uneven, and his hand trembled as he reached for the back of a chair to steady himself. Megan's concern had now fully transformed into alarm. "Something's really wrong," she said, looking between Lucas and Clara. "I need to get him help now." Clara inhaled sharply, her composure slipping just for a fraction of a second. Then, with practiced ease, she forced her expression into something resembling concern. I don't know what's happening," she said, stepping forward. "Maybe he's just having a reaction to something. Maybe he's allergic to something in the salad." I narrowed my eyes at her. "Is he?" Megan shook her head. "Oh no, he eats everything. He's never had allergies." The carefully crafted excuse that Clara had been trying to build crumbled instantly. She licked her lips, shifting uncomfortably under my gaze. "Maybe the greens were bad," she suggested, her voice almost too light, too casual. "Sometimes leafy vegetables can have bacteria." "Cut the crap." I didn't raise my voice, but the words came out firm, cold. Clara's head snapped toward me, her breath catching. Megan blinked, startled. "What?" I leaned against the table, keeping my focus on my wife. "But know exactly what's happening to him, don't you?" Clara bristled. "That's ridiculous." "Is it?" I asked. "And because I think you were expecting someone else to be feeling like this right now." Her pupils dilated, a sharp inhale. I saw it. That brief flicker of fear. She knew. She knew I had figured it out. Megan's gaze darted between the two of us, confusion morphing into suspicion. "What are you talking about?" she demanded. "Why are you looking at Clara like that?" Clara forced a laugh. It was shaky. "Oh, because he's always jumping to conclusions," she said, shaking her head dismissively. "Oh, he loves his little conspiracy theories." I took a slow step forward, closing the distance between us. "Then prove me wrong." She blinked. "What?" I gestured toward Lucas, who was now slumped over slightly, Megan still supporting his weight. "If you didn't do anything, then you should have no problem with a toxicology test." Silence. A heavy, unbearable silence. Then, finally, Clara's mask cracked just a little. Her breath came quicker now, her hands tightening into fists at her sides. "You're being insane," she snapped, "when you're making a scene in front of everyone." "That's not an answer." Megan's gaze shifted to Clara now, realization creeping into her features. "Wait," her voice wavered. "Wait a second." I could see it happening, the shift. Megan was beginning to connect the dots. "Are you saying—" Her voice faltered as she looked at me, then back at her husband, then at Clara. "Are you saying that Clara did this?" Lucas groaned softly, his breathing slow, too slow. The tension in the room was unbearable now. Clara let out a sharp, frustrated breath. "I can't believe this," she muttered. "And you're actually accusing me of something so outrageous." "Then let's go to the hospital," I said smoothly, "and let's have them test him. If I'm wrong, I'll apologize right here in front of everyone." I let my words settle, let them sink deep into her mind, twisting around every fear she had. Her jaw tightened, her nostrils flared slightly. She knew she was trapped. Megan was no longer just concerned. She was staring at Clara as if she didn't recognize her anymore. "Clara," Megan said, voice shaking, "tell me the truth." Clara scoffed. "Kiss is insane." "Then come with us to the hospital," I repeated. "Let's clear this up." For a split second I saw it. Panic, raw, unfiltered panic. She knew she couldn't refuse because if she did, it would confirm everything. Her mouth opened and closed, searching for the right words, some way to escape, some way to regain control. But there was no way out. And then, like a switch had been flipped, she changed tactics. Her body relaxed, just slightly, her shoulders rolling back, her expression shifting into something more composed. "You're really making a mistake," she murmured, her voice softer now. "But fine. If it'll make you feel better, let's go." I smiled, just a little. Checkmate. Megan wasted no time, helping Lucas to his feet, though he was struggling to stay upright. "Come on, baby," she whispered, panic thickening her tone. "We're going to get you help." One of the other guests, who had been awkwardly silent throughout the whole ordeal, finally spoke up. "Do you need us to call an ambulance?" "No," Megan said quickly. "We'll drive him." I stepped aside, letting her guide Lucas toward the front door. But as I followed, I turned my head slightly, just enough to see Clara watching me. Her face was carefully blank now, but her eyes told a different story. They weren't full of regret or guilt. They were full of something else. Hate. I exhaled slowly, letting the moment stretch between us. She thought this was over. She thought she still had a chance to fix this. She had no idea. Because this was only the beginning. The ride to the hospital was heavy with silence, thick and suffocating. Lucas sat slumped in the passenger seat of Megan's car, his head resting weakly against the window, his breaths uneven. Megan, her knuckles white against the steering wheel, kept glancing at him with rising panic, her lips pressed into a thin, worried line. Clara sat in the back seat beside me, unnervingly quiet. She wasn't crying, she wasn't panicking, she wasn't frantically trying to defend herself. She was simply staring straight ahead, unmoving, her hands folded in her lap. But I could see the tension in her shoulders, the subtle twitch of her fingers, the way her nails dug into her palms just enough to turn the skin white. She was thinking, calculating. I could almost hear the gears turning in her mind. She knew she had made a mistake. She knew the switch at dinner had changed everything. And now she was in damage control mode. I watched her out of the corner of my eye, but I didn't speak. I let the silence stretch between us, let the weight of it press down on her, suffocating her under the reality of what she had done. Megan, unaware of the war happening in the back seat, finally spoke, her voice strained. "I don't understand. How could this happen?" No one answered. Lucas groaned softly, shifting in his seat. "Oh, babe, my stomach." Megan tightened her grip on the wheel, swallowing hard. "We're almost there, baby. Just hold on." I turned my gaze to Clara. She flinched, just barely, but I caught it. Slowly, she turned her head toward me, her expression unreadable. "What was in the salad?" I asked, my voice calm. Her eyes darkened. "You're still on that?" I tilted my head slightly, studying her. "You're awfully quiet for someone who's innocent." Her jaw tightened. "I have nothing to say." I chuckled under my breath. "Fat's a first." She turned away, her fingers curling into fists. "You're being ridiculous," she muttered, but her voice was shaking. She was scared. Good, because she should be. We pulled into the emergency entrance of the hospital, and Megan wasted no time jumping out, running to the other side to help Lucas. He was weaker now, his movements sluggish, his head lolling slightly as she helped him out of the car. A nurse rushed toward us, quickly assessing the situation. "What's going on?" He just suddenly started feeling sick," Megan said frantically. "We were at dinner and he just—" Lucas groaned, gripping his stomach, and the nurse nodded quickly. "All right, let's get him inside." As they helped him into a wheelchair and rushed him toward the entrance, I turned back to Clara. She was watching them go, her face carefully blank, too blank. And then she turned to me, and she smiled. Not a real smile, a challenge. I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. "You're unbelievable." She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice so only I could hear. "You think you've won something, don't you?" I arched a brow. "Haven't I?" Her lips parted, but before she could respond, Megan called out from the entrance. "Come on!" I shot Clara one last look before heading inside. We stepped into the bright, sterile lights of the emergency room, the scent of antiseptic filling my nose. Lucas was being wheeled into a triage room, nurses surrounding him, asking him questions, checking his vitals. Megan stood nearby, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, her face pale. I walked up beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "They'll figure it out." She swallowed hard, nodding. Yeah, I hope so." A doctor entered, glancing between all of us. "I need to ask some questions," he said, looking directly at Megan. "And has your husband eaten anything unusual tonight?" Megan hesitated, then turned to Clara. Clara's face remained composed, her voice steady. We all ate the same thing," she said smoothly. I narrowed my eyes. "Did we?" She shot me a quick warning glance. The doctor looked between us, his gaze sharp. "What exactly did he eat?" Megan licked her lips. We had salad. My sister made it." Clara smiled politely. "It was a simple salad." The doctor nodded, writing something down. "All right. We're going to run some tests, but based on his symptoms, we're looking at some kind of toxin or poison in his system." Megan's breath hitched. "Poison?" The doctor nodded. "It could be foodborne, or it could be something else. We'll know more soon." Megan turned to Clara, but Clara was already shaking her head. "You're not seriously thinking—" Megan's voice trembled. "Did you do something?" Clara let out a soft, disbelieving laugh. "Oh, Megan, come on." Megan took a step back. "Owen, Clara, I swear to God, I didn't do anything," Clara snapped, her composure cracking just a little. The doctor sighed. "Let's not jump to conclusions just yet. We'll let the tests speak for themselves." I folded my arms, watching Clara closely. "I can't wait." She glared at me. Time passed, minutes stretching into what felt like hours. Megan paced the floor. Clara sat stiffly in a chair, arms crossed, staring at the wall. I remained standing, watching her every move. Then the doctor returned, and the look on his face told me everything. "When we have results." Megan rushed forward. "What is it?" The doctor exhaled. But there was a foreign substance in his system. Something that should not be in food. Megan's face drained of color. I turned to Clara. She was frozen, but I saw the way her breath hitched, the way her fingers twitched just slightly against her knee. The doctor continued. "It's a slow-acting toxin, not lethal in small doses, but it builds up over time." I inhaled sharply. "So it wasn't a one-time thing?" The doctor shook his head. "No. This isn't something you accidentally ingest once." Megan turned to Clara, her voice breaking. "Clara." Clara opened her mouth, closed it, and for the first time all night she had no words. I leaned down beside her, my voice quiet. "Oh, we're right about one thing," I murmured. She turned to me, eyes flashing. "What?" I smiled. "We all ate the same thing. But only Lucas got sick. Wonder why that is." And just like that, her face crumbled. Checkmate. The weight of the doctor's words settled over the room like a thick fog. Megan was frozen, her hands clutched tightly together, as if she could physically hold herself upright against the truth that was unfolding before her. Lucas lay in the hospital bed, his breathing shallow but steady, his face still pale, and Clara was unraveling. She was still seated, her body rigid, but I could see the cracks forming. The way her fingers curled into the fabric of her dress, the way her throat bobbed as she swallowed hard, struggling to maintain the mask she had worn so well for so long. I had seen Clara manipulate situations before, twisting reality to her advantage. But this was different. This wasn't something she could charm her way out of. The facts were piling up against her, brick by damning brick. And for the first time, she had no control over what happened next. Megan turned toward her, her voice barely a whisper. "Clara, tell me the truth." Clara's breath hitched. Megan, She shook her head, forcing out a brittle laugh. "You're not actually listening to this nonsense, are you?" I stepped forward, my voice even. "Tess doesn't lie, Clara." She snapped her head toward me, eyes flashing with something between fury and panic. "Oh, and I suppose you're loving this, aren't you?" she spat. "Finally getting to paint me as the villain." I tilted my head, studying her. "I didn't have to paint you as anything, Clara. You did that all by yourself." Her breathing was uneven now, her body tense like a predator backed into a corner. "This is insane," she muttered. "You know what? Fine, let's pretend for a second that I actually did something." Megan recoiled, as if she had been slapped. "Pretend?" Clara groaned, rubbing her temple. "Oh, I'm just saying, if I had done anything, why would I have done it in front of so many people? That doesn't even make sense." I let out a slow breath. "Because you weren't expecting Lucas to eat it. You were expecting me to—" The silence that followed was suffocating. Megan gasped, stepping back, as if she had just realized she was standing too close to something dangerous. "Oh my God!" Lucas shifted weakly on the hospital bed, letting out a low groan. Megan turned to him, brushing his damp forehead. "Baby, I'm here," she whispered, her voice shaking. Then she turned back to Clara, tears welling in her eyes. You poisoned my husband." Clara bolted to her feet, her hands raised. "I didn't." I cut her off, my tone sharp. "Tell me, Clara, how long have you been doing it?" She froze. Megan blinked. "What do you mean?" I didn't take my eyes off Clara. The doctor said the toxin builds up over time, which means this wasn't just a single attempt. It's been happening for months, hasn't it? Clara's breathing grew more ragged. She shook her head, her eyes darting around, as if searching for an escape. "That's ridiculous." I folded my arms. "Is it?" Megan's voice trembled. "Clara, what is he talking about?" Clara let out a sharp breath, her mask of calm slipping further. "I don't know what's happening. Maybe the test is wrong. Maybe something else made Lucas sick." The doctor cleared his throat, stepping forward. "One test isn't wrong, ma'am, and we've already ruled out foodborne illness." He turned to Megan. "We'll need to run more tests to determine just how much of the toxin is built up in his system, but if he's been ingesting it for an extended period, there could be long-term effects." Megan let out a soft sob, covering her mouth. "Oh my God." I turned back to Clara, my voice steady. "Did you ever plan to stop?" Her head snapped toward me, eyes burning with hatred. "Stop what?" she hissed. I took a slow step forward, lowering my voice. "Poisoning me." Megan's breath caught. Clara's lips trembled, but she forced a smirk. "You're delusional." I exhaled sharply. "And explain why I've been sick. Explain why every time I ate food you made I felt dizzy, weak, nauseous. Explain why when I started eating out more and avoiding your meals, the symptoms disappeared." Clara clenched her jaw, but she said nothing. Megan turned to me, her voice barely above a whisper. "Oh, you think she's been poisoning you this whole time?" I nodded. "Not enough to kill me, just enough to keep me weak, just enough to make me second-guess myself, maybe even enough to get me out of the way permanently, just not in an obvious way." I looked at Clara. "Am I wrong?" Her nostrils flared. "Screw you." Megan gasped. "Oh my God, you really did it." Clara's mask shattered completely. "Oh, you're so full of yourself," she spat at me, "always acting like you're so much smarter than everyone else. But you're not. You're pathetic." Megan stepped back. "You tried to kill my husband." Clara's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time in our entire marriage, she was speechless. And that's when I knew I had won. The doctor cleared his throat. "Shall be informing the authorities." Clara's head snapped toward him. "What?" The doctor's expression was firm. "Tyson poisoning someone isn't just unethical, it's a crime." Megan turned back to Clara, tears streaming down her face. "Oh, how could you do this?" Clara let out a sharp breath, her hands shaking. "Oh, I didn't mean to—" But Megan was already shaking her head. No more lies. She took a deep breath, turning away. "I need to be with my husband." Clara took a step forward. Megan didn't even look at her, and just like that, Clara had lost her last ally. The weight of it hit her all at once. I saw it happen, the realization, the fear, the understanding that no one would be on her side after this. She turned toward me instead, her face twisted with fury. "This isn't over," she whispered. I smiled, just a little. "Oh, Clara," I murmured. "It's already over." The door swung open behind her and the police walked in. For the first time that night, I saw true fear in her eyes. Clara's body stiffened the moment the officers stepped into the room. For a split second, she didn't move, didn't breathe. It was as if her mind had short-circuited, trying to process what was happening. She had spent the entire evening controlling the narrative, spinning her lies with the precision of a practiced manipulator. But now, standing in front of two uniformed officers, she had lost all control. Her eyes darted to me first, pure hatred burning in them. A silent promise that if she went down, she'd do everything she could to drag me down with her. Then she turned to Megan, her sister, her last hope, only to find Megan standing protectively beside Lucas, arms folded tightly around herself, her face drawn with grief and betrayal. Megan wouldn't save her. No one would. The older of the two officers, a tall, broad-shouldered man with graying hair, stepped forward and cleared his throat. "Setch, we received a report from the hospital staff," he said, his voice firm but calm. His gaze shifted to Clara. "Are you Clara?" Clara's lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to say no, as if she could somehow rewrite reality one last time. But then she snapped her mouth shut, swallowing hard. "Yes," she finally muttered. The second officer, a younger man with sharp eyes, took a notepad from his pocket. "I need to ask you a few questions," he said. "It would be best if you answered truthfully." Clara's breathing was uneven now, her fingers clenching at the fabric of her dress.
"Tis is a mistake," she said quickly. "So I didn't do anything."
Megan let out a soft, bitter laugh. "Oh, you really can't stop lying, can you?" Clara snapped her head toward her sister, her expression a mixture of desperation and anger. "Oh, Ben, you know me. You know I would never—" "And I thought I knew you," Megan interrupted, her voice raw. "But I don't, because the sister I knew wouldn't have poisoned my husband." Lucas, still weak in his hospital bed, let out a quiet groan. Megan immediately turned back to him, brushing a damp strand of hair from his forehead.
"Chindy, I'm right here, baby," she whispered.
That moment, the tenderness, the love, the absolute devastation, was the final nail in Clara's coffin. The officers exchanged a glance before the older one spoke again. "One, toxicology results indicate that your brother-in-law ingested a foreign substance that should not have been in his food. Given the circumstances, we have reason to believe this was intentional." Clara's chest rose and fell rapidly. "You have no proof." I took a slow step forward, reaching into my pocket. "Oh, sexually," I murmured, pulling out my phone. "But we do." I tapped the screen, playing back the recording from earlier. Clara's voice filled the room, the sharp defensiveness, the excuses, the exact moment her composure cracked. But the most damning part? The way she flinched when I suggested a toxicology test. I turned the volume up. The recording played the moment I had asked, "What exactly was in that salad, honey?" And Clara's silence, her hesitation, her flinch. The officers listened carefully. The older one nodded slowly. "That's interesting," he said, jotting something down. Then he turned back to Clara. "Would you like to explain why you reacted that way?" Clara's face was pale now. "Tis is ridiculous," she snapped. "You're seriously basing this on a flinch?" "Oh no," the officer replied. "We're basing this on the test results, on the victim's symptoms, and on the fact that all evidence points to one person, you." Clara took a step back, her breath coming in short gasps. "No," she muttered, shaking her head. "Oh, don't understand." The younger officer flipped to a new page in his notepad.
"Fen, help us understand. Tell us why your husband has been experiencing unexplained illnesses for months."
Clara's entire body went rigid, silence. Then, slowly, she turned to face me. The hatred in her eyes was suffocating. "Oh, did this," she whispered, her voice trembling, "since you turned everyone against me." I chuckled, shaking my head. "Oh no, Clara, you did that all by yourself." Her breathing grew erratic, her hands shaking violently at her sides. "You have no idea what you've done." The older officer sighed. "All right, Mrs. Clara, we're placing you under arrest for attempted poisoning and aggravated assault." Megan gasped. Lucas, barely conscious, let out a weak groan. Clara, however, let out a short, hysterical laugh. "Are you serious?" She looked around the room as if waiting for someone to object, but no one did. The older officer stepped forward, reaching for his cuffs. "Ma'am, turn around and place your hands behind your back." For a moment I thought she was going to run. Her eyes darted toward the door, her body tensed, as if preparing to make a break for it. But then she must have realized how hopeless it was. She was cornered, trapped in a hospital room with no escape. Slowly, reluctantly, she turned around. The click of the cuffs locking around her wrists echoed in the silent room. Her shoulders trembled. Her carefully constructed world had just collapsed around her. The officers led her toward the door, but just before she stepped out, she turned her head slightly, her gaze locking onto mine one last time. And then she said it, a whisper just for me. "It isn't over." A chill ran down my spine. I stared at her, unblinking. "Oh, Clara," I murmured. "Sorry, it's already over." She clenched her jaw, but she didn't fight back. The officers pulled her through the doorway, and just like that, she was gone. Megan let out a shaky breath, collapsing into the chair beside Lucas's bed. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I walked over, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "She can't hurt him anymore," I said softly. Megan sniffled, lifting her head. "Oh, I don't understand," she whispered. "How could she do this?" I sighed. "Because she thought she could get away with it." Lucas stirred, his eyelids fluttering open. "Oh, Meg," he croaked. Megan immediately leaned over him, brushing his hair back. Right here, baby, you're safe." He swallowed thickly, his gaze flickering toward me. "What happened?" I exhaled. Justice happened." Lucas blinked, his eyes unfocused, but slowly coming to terms with the reality around him. Megan kissed his forehead, murmuring soft reassurances, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I let myself relax. Clara was gone. The nightmare was over. And as I stood in that hospital room, watching Megan hold Lucas's hand, I realized something. I'd been walking through life with a blindfold on, trusting someone who had never truly been on my side, but now I was finally free. The silence after Clara was taken away was heavy. Megan sat at Lucas's bedside, her hands gripping his weak fingers, as if they were the only thing tethering her to reality. Lucas's eyes were half-lidded, exhausted from the ordeal, but he was stable now. The doctors had confirmed that the worst was over, that the toxin had been purged from his system before permanent damage could be done. Still, the emotional wounds were fresh. I stood near the door, watching as Megan wiped away the silent tears streaking down her cheeks. The room smelled sterile, the beep of the machines rhythmic and steady, a stark contrast to the chaos that had unfolded just moments ago. Megan exhaled shakily and turned to me. "She really did it." I nodded, my expression unreadable. "Oh yeah, she did." She let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. "You know, for years I always told myself Clara was just difficult, that she was controlling because she cared, that she was stubborn because she wanted the best for everyone. But this..." Her voice wavered. "This is pure evil." I exhaled, stepping closer. She knew exactly what she was doing. Megan squeezed Lucas's hand a little tighter. "Do you really think she was doing this to you too?" I let out a low chuckle, though there was no humor in it. "So I don't think, Megan. I know." Her lips pressed together, her expression darkening. "Oh, my God." I shrugged. It was never enough to kill me outright, but looking back I see the pattern. The unexplained sickness, the fatigue, the headaches. She was careful, controlled, just enough to keep me weak, just enough to make me doubt myself. And if tonight hadn't happened, if Lucas hadn't eaten my plate... I let my words hang in the air. Megan's eyes filled with horror. She would have kept going. I nodded. Until I was no longer a problem. She shook her head, disbelief and fury battling for dominance in her features. "How did I never see it?" I sighed. "Because we don't expect the people we love to be capable of something like this." Her expression twisted in pain. "She's my sister. I know she tried to kill my husband. I know..." Megan swallowed hard. "And she almost got away with it." That was the part that hit the hardest. The realization that if I had ignored my instincts, if I had taken even one more bite of that salad, things might have gone very differently tonight. Clara had spent months crafting the perfect illusion, building trust, planting seeds of doubt, manipulating every situation to her advantage. And she had done it with such precision that, up until the last moment, no one had suspected a thing. But now the illusion had shattered. Lucas stirred beside Megan, his voice hoarse. "Babe." She immediately turned her attention back to him, brushing her fingers through his damp hair. "I'm here, love." He blinked, his gaze unfocused. "What happened?" Megan hesitated, her throat bobbing as she tried to find the right words. Finally, she exhaled and whispered, "Clara poisoned you." Lucas frowned, his brows knitting together, as if his brain couldn't quite process the information. "Clara?" Megan nodded, her grip tightening on his hand. "And she put something in your food. It was meant for someone else, but you ended up eating it." Lucas was silent for a long moment. Then, very slowly, he turned his head toward me. "Meant for you?" I nodded. Yeah. His breathing grew heavier as the realization sank in. Jesus. Megan smoothed a hand over his arm. It's over now, she whispered. She's gone. Lucas let out a slow, unsteady breath. She really did that? I leaned against the wall, my arms crossed. Yeah, and she's been doing it for a while. Lucas shut his eyes, exhaling sharply. Sai always knew she was cold, but this... He shook his head weakly. I can't believe it. Megan wiped at her eyes, sniffing. Can I... The room fell into another stretch of silence. I let them sit in it, let them process what had happened, let them grieve the loss of the woman they thought they knew. Finally, Megan turned to me. What happens now? I sighed. She'll be charged. With the toxicology results, the recording, and the hospital report, there's enough evidence to convict her. Megan swallowed. How long will she get? I shrugged. It depends. But with attempted poisoning and premeditation? A long time. Megan let out a shaky breath, rubbing her face. Oh, God. Lucas shifted slightly, wincing. Does she even feel bad about it? I met his gaze, my voice calm. No. Megan's expression twisted. She wasn't even sorry? No, I agreed. She was angry. Not because she got caught, but because she failed. A visible shudder ran through Megan's body. She was willing to let you die, she whispered. She was willing to let Lucas die. I nodded. Because in her mind, we were obstacles, problems to be dealt with, nothing more. Lucas exhaled, staring at the ceiling. She really was a monster. Megan let out a bitter laugh.
Yeah, and I defended her for years.
Guilt weighed heavy in her voice. I stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. You didn't know. She shook her head. But I should have. I didn't argue. I knew Megan needed to process this on her own. She had spent her whole life seeing Clara as her older sister, her protector, the woman who always seemed to have everything together. But now she had to face the ugly truth. Clara wasn't who she thought she was. And maybe she never had been. Lucas groaned softly, shifting again. Oh, babe. Megan turned her full attention back to him, running a soothing hand over his forehead. I'm here, love. I'm here. I took that as my cue to step back, giving them their space. I had done what I came to do. Clara was gone. Lucas was safe. And me? For the first time in a long time, I was free. I let out a slow breath, glancing toward the hospital doors. Outside, the world kept moving. People laughed, talked, lived. And I had almost lost my chance to be part of it. I had spent months feeling weak, questioning myself, blaming everything but the one person who had been orchestrating my downfall. But now I knew better. I straightened my shoulders and took a slow step toward the door. For the first time in years, I was walking away from Clara. And I wasn't looking back. The days that followed felt surreal, like I had woken up in someone else's life. There was no more walking on eggshells in my own home, no more questioning my health, no more second-guessing my instincts. The weight I had been carrying for months, maybe even years, was gone. Clara was gone. And yet, I found myself standing in my kitchen, staring at the empty space where she used to stand while cooking, the air heavy with an eerie stillness. I should have felt relieved. I should have been celebrating my freedom, my survival. Instead, there was a strange, hollow sensation in my chest. Not sadness exactly, but the unsettling realization of just how close I had come to losing everything. I ran a hand over my face, exhaling slowly. The morning sun streamed through the window, casting long shadows across the tiled floor. Everything was the same, yet completely different. The police had come by the house the day after Clara's arrest. They searched through our belongings, bagging evidence, taking samples. They found a bottle hidden deep in the pantry, something unmarked, something lethal in the wrong doses, something meant for me. The detective, a no-nonsense man with tired eyes, had given me a long look as he held up the evidence bag. She was patient, he had said. Careful. And that was what haunted me the most. How long had Clara been planning this? How many times had she stood in this kitchen, mixing up her carefully measured doses, watching me take bite after bite with that same practiced smile? I shook the thought away, pushing myself off the counter. Dwelling on it wouldn't change anything. She was in jail now, awaiting trial. The charges were serious. Attempted murder, aggravated assault, premeditated poisoning. With the evidence stacked against her, it was unlikely she'd see the outside of a prison for decades. I should have felt victorious, but all I felt was exhausted. The sound of my phone vibrating on the counter broke me out of my thoughts. I glanced at the screen. Megan. I hesitated for a second before answering. Okay, she said, her voice softer than usual. Chew, I just wanted to check in. How are you doing? I let out a short laugh. Honestly? No idea. Megan sighed. Yeah, me neither. I could hear the weight in her tone, the same exhaustion I felt. This wasn't just my nightmare. It was hers too. She had lost a sister, but not in the way people usually do. Clara wasn't gone because of some tragic accident. She had destroyed herself. And now Megan had to live with the knowledge that she had once trusted someone who was capable of something so monstrous. How's Lucas? I asked. He's recovering, she said, a slight tremor in her voice. Physically, he's doing a lot better, but mentally, she paused.
ATP, I think it's going to take time.
I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Yeah, that makes sense. There was a long pause between us. Then Megan exhaled. I can't believe I defended her for so long. When you didn't know. Oh, and I should have, she muttered. Oh, and I should have seen the signs. I should have questioned things more. She stopped herself, then took a shaky breath. And I keep thinking about all the times I made excuses for her. All the times she made you feel like you were the problem. And I let her... I closed my eyes. You're not responsible for what she did, Megan. Maybe not, she admitted. But I feel like I let her get away with too much for too long. I didn't know what to say to that because deep down I understood. I had done the same thing. I had ignored the warning signs, rationalized the small betrayals, convinced myself that I was just being paranoid. And it almost cost me my life. Megan cleared her throat. Oh, I've been talking to a therapist. About it. About Clara. About everything. I raised a brow. That's probably a good idea. She hesitated. You should think about it too. I let out a short laugh. To Megan, I think therapy might break me at this point. She didn't laugh. I'm serious. I sighed, rubbing the back of my neck. I'll think about it. She hummed softly, clearly not convinced, but willing to let it go for now. Another pause, then she spoke again, quieter this time. Do you think she ever really loved you? The question hit me harder than I expected. I ran a hand through my hair, my chest tightening. I don't know. And that was the truth. Maybe, in her own twisted way, Clara had once loved me. Maybe she had started off with good intentions, believing she was doing what was best for us. Maybe she had convinced herself that her actions were justified, that making me weaker, more dependent on her, was some kind of necessary evil. Or maybe she had never loved me at all. Maybe I had been nothing more than a tool to her, a means to an end. I swallowed hard, my voice quieter. But I know she didn't respect me. Megan exhaled softly. Yeah. And in the end, maybe that was worse. Because love without respect wasn't really love at all. After a few more minutes of small talk, Megan finally let me go, promising to check in later. I set my phone down and stared at the empty house around me. It was mine now, completely, truly mine. I should have felt free, but instead, all I felt was the ghost of what had almost been. I turned toward the window, watching as the world outside moved on, oblivious to the storm that had just passed through my life. Clara was gone. Lucas was safe. Megan was healing. And me? I had survived. But surviving wasn't the same as living. I had spent so long under Clara's control that I wasn't sure who I was without her. What did I even want now? Where did I go from here? I didn't have the answers. But for the first time in a long time, I was free to find them. And maybe that was enough. It had been 2 weeks since Clara's arrest, and yet her presence still lingered like a ghost in every corner of the house. I had scrubbed the kitchen, replaced the linens, even rearranged some of the furniture, but no matter what I did, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was still watching me. Or maybe it wasn't her. Maybe it was just the paranoia she had planted inside me over the years, refusing to let go. I stood in the doorway of my bedroom, staring at the neatly made bed. It was strange sleeping alone now. The first few nights I hardly got any rest, my body still conditioned to the weight of someone lying beside me. But the absence of Clara was different from a simple breakup. She wasn't just gone, she had been removed, and the knowledge of what she had done, what she had planned for me, made the silence of the house feel like both a blessing and a curse. I took a deep breath and stepped inside, moving to the closet. I had put this off long enough. If I wanted to start over, truly start over, then I needed to get rid of everything that reminded me of her. I pulled open the closet doors, my eyes scanning over her neatly arranged clothes, dresses, blouses, shoes lined up in perfect order. Clara had always been meticulous about her appearance, about maintaining control over every aspect of our home. Even now, after everything, it looked untouched, as if she could walk through the front door at any moment and scold me for messing with her organization. But she wasn't coming back. I reached for the first set of hangers and started pulling them down, tossing them into a pile. One by one, I emptied the shelves, stripping away every piece of her from this house. Some part of me expected it to feel cathartic, liberating, but instead, with every dress that fell to the floor, I felt something else: anger. This wasn't just clothing. These were the things she had worn while standing in the kitchen, smiling sweetly as she served me poisoned meals, the dresses she had worn to dinner parties, laughing at my jokes while slowly weakening my body, the heels she had worn while walking past me with that practiced, innocent expression, knowing I was too blind to see the truth. I clenched my jaw, gripping a particularly expensive-looking dress and hurling it across the room. It hit the far wall and crumpled into a heap. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to erase her. The anger burned hotter. She had stolen so much from me: my health, my peace of mind, my ability to trust. She had manipulated me, made me doubt my own body, my own instincts. And for what? Power? Control? I had spent so much time wondering why she did it, trying to piece together the motive behind something so cruel. But standing here now, surrounded by the remnants of the woman who had tried to kill me, I realized something. It didn't matter why. It would never make sense to me, because I wasn't like her. I wasn't capable of that kind of betrayal, that level of cold calculation. I could spend the rest of my life searching for answers, but it wouldn't change the fact that she had made a choice, and now so had I. I grabbed a garbage bag and started shoving her clothes inside, my movements quick and efficient. The sooner this was done, the better. I wasn't going to let her haunt me any longer. An hour later, the closet was empty, the bags tied up and waiting by the door. I would donate them. I didn't care who took them, as long as they were out of my house. I wiped my hands on my jeans and took a step back, surveying the now bare space. It was mine again, completely mine. And yet, I still didn't feel free. I turned away, running a hand through my hair. I needed air. Stepping out onto the porch, I inhaled deeply, letting the crisp evening breeze fill my lungs. The sky was fading into hues of orange and purple, the world outside moving forward as if nothing had happened. People walked by, cars drove down the street, laughter echoed from a nearby house. Life went on. I pulled out my phone and hesitated before dialing. After a few rings, Megan answered. "Hey," she said, her voice softer now, more exhausted than before. "Hey," I murmured. "How's Lucas?" She let out a slow breath. "Better. The doctors say he should make a full recovery, but it'll take time." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "That's good." A pause. "And you?" she asked carefully. I glanced back at the house, my jaw tightening. I don't know." Megan didn't rush to fill the silence. She waited, giving me the space to figure out what I wanted to say. "And I got rid of her stuff," I finally admitted. There was a brief pause before she responded. "How did it feel?" I let out a short, humorless laugh, like ripping out weeds, only to realize the roots are still there. She sighed. "Oh, yeah, I get that." Another pause, then Megan spoke again, her voice hesitant. I went to see her." I froze. "What?" "And at the jail," she clarified. "And I needed to see her. I needed answers." My grip tightened on the phone. "And?" Megan swallowed audibly. "She wasn't sorry." I closed my eyes. Of course she wasn't. "Say just kept talking in circles," Megan continued. "Blaming you, blaming me, blaming Lucas. She acted like she was the victim." I exhaled slowly. "That sounds about right. And I think she really believes she did nothing wrong." "She's a textbook narcissist," I said, rubbing a hand over my face. "She never cared about anyone but herself." Megan hesitated. "Oh, I told her I never wanted to see her again." "Could," I said firmly. "You don't owe her anything." Another beat of silence stretched between us before Megan spoke again, quieter this time. "Are you going to the trial?" I stared out at the street, my thoughts heavy. "And I don't know," I admitted. "Oh, if you don't have to," she said quickly. "Oh, don't owe her that." "I know," I said, "but maybe I owe it to myself." Megan didn't argue. "If you do, I'll be there." I nodded. "Thanks, Megan," she sighed. "We'll get through this." "Yeah," I murmured. I hung up and slipped my phone back into my pocket, staring up at the darkening sky. Clara had tried to break me. She had failed. And now, for the first time in a long time, my future was mine again. The day of Clara's trial arrived faster than I expected. I had spent the past few weeks trying to rebuild my life, reclaiming my house, my routine, my sense of normalcy. But no matter how much I tried to move forward, there was always a shadow lingering behind me, a weight pressing against my chest, reminding me that unfinished business still loomed ahead. And today, that business was finally coming to a close. I arrived at the courthouse early, stepping out of my car into the crisp morning air. The sky was a dull gray, the kind of overcast that threatened rain but never quite delivered, a fitting backdrop for the final chapter of this nightmare. As I walked up the courthouse steps, I spotted Megan standing off to the side, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. She looked nervous, but when she saw me, she forced a small, tired smile. "And made it," she murmured. I nodded. "Yeah." She searched my face for a moment, before exhaling. "I wasn't sure if you'd come." I let out a dry chuckle. Neither was I." Megan nodded, rubbing her arms as if to ward off the cold. "And Igikis wanted to be here, but he's still recovering." I frowned. "How's he doing?" "Better," she said, "physically at least. But mentally..." She shook her head. "And I don't know. Some nights he still wakes up in a panic, convinced he's going to start feeling sick again." I clenched my jaw. Clara did more damage than just the poisoning. Megan sighed. "Yeah." A long pause stretched between us, heavy with unspoken words. Then she glanced toward the courthouse doors. "Are you ready for this?" I didn't answer immediately because the truth was I didn't know if I was. But ready or not, I was here, and I needed to see this through. We made our way inside, the sterile white hallways leading us toward the courtroom. The atmosphere was tense, hushed conversations and the occasional shuffle of papers filling the space. As we entered, I spotted the prosecution setting up their documents, while a few reporters lingered in the back, waiting for the trial to begin. And then I saw her. Clara. She was sitting at the defense table, wearing a beige prison uniform, her hands cuffed in front of her. For a moment our eyes met, and just like that, the months of distance, the weeks of separation, the barriers of jail bars and legal proceedings melted away. I saw her, the woman I had once loved, the woman who had smiled at me across dinner tables, held my hand in crowded rooms, whispered promises into my ear late at night. But that woman was gone. Maybe she had never existed at all. Clara's gaze flickered with something unreadable before she turned away, her posture stiff, her face blank. I exhaled slowly, steadying myself. This was it. The trial began with the prosecution laying out the facts. They detailed how the toxicology report confirmed the presence of poison in Lucas's system, how the investigation uncovered traces of the same substance hidden in my own home. They played my recording, the moment I confronted Clara at dinner, the hesitation in her voice, the way she flinched at my accusation. Then they introduced the doctors who had treated Lucas, explaining how the poisoning had been slow and calculated, meant to weaken rather than kill instantly. The evidence was overwhelming, and yet Clara didn't react. She sat motionless, her face unreadable, as if she were simply an observer in someone else's story. Then came Megan's testimony. She stood at the witness stand, hands trembling slightly, and recounted everything. Lucas's sudden illness, my confrontation with Clara, the moment the doctors confirmed the poisoning. But it was what she said at the end that stuck with me the most. "He defended her for years," she whispered. And I ignored the red flags, made excuses. I told myself she was just difficult, not dangerous. Her voice broke slightly, but I was wrong. She turned her gaze toward Clara then, her eyes filled with something raw. "She's not the person I thought she was." I swallowed hard, because neither was I. The defense tried to argue that there was no direct proof that Clara had poisoned anyone. They claimed it could have been an accident, that the substance found in the house could have been unrelated. But when they finally called Clara to the stand, she didn't play the victim. She didn't beg for sympathy. She didn't even deny it. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, her lips curling into the faintest hint of a smirk. So I did what I had to do. A stunned silence followed. Even her own lawyer stiffened slightly, as if he hadn't been expecting that answer. The prosecutor frowned. "And what exactly does that mean?" Clara shrugged. "Oh, you all want to paint me as some kind of monster, but I was just making sure things stayed in balance." My stomach twisted. "Balance?" the prosecutor echoed. Clara leaned forward slightly. "People think relationships are about love. They're not. They're about control. The person who holds the most power wins. Megan let out a soft gasp beside me, and suddenly, I understood. She had never loved me. Not really, not in the way I had loved her. To Clara, our marriage had never been about partnership or affection. It had been a game, and I had been nothing more than a piece on her board. I clenched my fists, anger simmering beneath my skin. The prosecutor took a slow breath, clearly gathering himself.
So you admit to poisoning your husband?
Clara's smile widened slightly. If that's what you want to call it? The courtroom erupted into murmurs. The judge banged his gavel, calling for order, but I barely heard it. My pulse roared in my ears, a mixture of fury and disbelief washing over me. This was it, her final move, and yet, in her arrogance, she had sealed her own fate. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous, guilty. Clara's expression didn't change, even as the judge delivered the sentence, 25 years without the possibility of parole. She remained eerily composed. But as the bailiffs approached to take her away, she turned her head, her gaze locking onto mine one last time. And in that moment, for the first time since this all began, I saw it. Fear. Not anger, not arrogance, not amusement. Fear. Because now, she had lost. I held her gaze, letting her see that I knew. Then I turned away. Megan let out a shaky breath beside me, her hands clasped together. "It's over," she whispered. I nodded slowly. "Yeah." Clara was gone, and this time, she wasn't coming back. As I stepped outside, the cold air hit me, filling my lungs with something that almost felt like relief. For the first time in a long time, I was free, and I intended to live.